My fiancé handed me a $5,000 check and told me I was too small for his future. He said he needed a woman who could own a room, not a girl who hides in the shadows. Julian thought I was just a quiet freelancer working from our cramped apartment. What he didn't know was that I was the one who built the ladder he was trying to climb. While he was busy proposing to an heiress to save his failing firm, I was signing the papers to buy his entire life. I am E.V. Rossi, the anonymous CEO he's been desperately begging for a meeting. I don't just own the room, Julian. I own the deed to the entire floor. And your parting gift? I'm using it to pay for your termination papers. Subscribe to see how I tore his world down, brick by brick. The smell of expensive espresso beans filled the kitchen, but it didn't mask the tension in the room. Elena Vance stood by the counter, quietly stirring a splash of cream into Julian's favorite mug. She was dressed in her usual oversized gray hoodie and leggings, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. To anyone looking through the window of their Brooklyn apartment, she looked like a woman who had nowhere else to be. Julian Thorne, however, didn't look at her at all. He was too busy pacing the length of the living room, a stack of blueprints under his arm. "The Montgomery deal is slipping through my fingers, Elena," Julian said, his voice tight with frustration. "If I don't impress the board tomorrow, I'm just another architect in a city full of them. This proposal needs to be flawless, but the structural integrity on the south wing it's missing something. It's too standard." He dropped the blueprints onto the dining table and sighed. "Not that you'd understand. Researching for blogs doesn't exactly prepare you for a 50-story skyscraper." Elena didn't correct him. She didn't tell him that her research involved analyzing the market volatility of the very firm he was trying to impress. She simply walked over and leaned over the drawings. "Maybe if you shift the load-bearing columns toward the atrium," she said softly, pointing to a cluttered corner of the sketch, "it would allow for more floor-to-ceiling glass without compromising the core. It makes the building look like it's floating." Julian paused, squinting at the paper. "That's actually not a bad idea. It's sophisticated. I'll make the adjustments." He didn't thank her. He just grabbed his pen and started redrawing, already claiming the thought as his own. By evening, the mood had shifted. Julian was dressed in a tailored tuxedo, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked every bit the rising star he wanted to be. "The Montgomery Gala is the event of the year," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Everyone who matters will be there. I need to make an impression." Elena stood in the doorway, a small, hopeful smile on her face. "I finished my work early. I could be ready in 20 minutes. Julian stopped. He turned to look at her, his eyes scanning her simple clothes with a mixture of pity and impatience. "Elena, honey, look at you. You're a great girl, really. You're stable and quiet, but this gala it's high pressure. It's for people who know how to command a room. You'd be miserable standing in a corner while I work the crowd. It's better if you stay here, where you're comfortable." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt more like a patronizing pat than an act of affection, and walked out the door. Elena stood in the silence of the apartment for a long time. Then she walked to the bedroom and opened a closet hidden behind her winter coats. Inside hung a gown of midnight blue silk, hand-stitched and worth more than Julian's car. 2 hours later, Elena stepped out of a black town car in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She wore an intricate lace mask over her eyes, a tradition for the evening's masquerade theme. As she walked up the steps, the security guards didn't ask for her invitation. They simply saw the way she carried herself and bowed.
Inside, the ballroom was a sea of gold and diamonds. Elena stayed in the shadows of the balcony, her eyes finding Julian immediately. He wasn't alone. He was standing with Chloe Montgomery, the heiress to the Montgomery fortune. Chloe was laughing, her hand resting heavily on Julian's arm. Then the music stopped. Chloe's father took the stage, a microphone in his hand. "Tonight is about the future," the older man announced, "and the future of Montgomery Global is about new blood. I'd like to invite a very special young man to the stage." Elena watched, her heart turning to ice, as Julian walked up the stairs. He didn't look nervous, he looked triumphant. He took the microphone, looked directly at Chloe, and dropped to one knee. "Chloe Montgomery," Julian's voice echoed through the hall, "you are the partner I've always dreamed of, a woman of ambition, a woman who matches my drive. Will you marry me and help me build an empire?" The room erupted in applause as Chloe screamed yes. From her dark corner, Elena watched Julian slide a diamond ring onto the finger of another woman, a ring he likely bought with the bonus he earned from the designs Elena had fixed for him. Elena didn't cry, she didn't make a scene, she simply turned and walked toward the exit. As she reached the heavy brass doors, her phone vibrated in her clutch. It was a text from Julian. "Hey, I'm going to be late. Don't wait up. We need to talk when I get back." Elena deleted the message. She dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "This is E.V. Rossi," she said, her voice cold and steady. "I want a full audit of Montgomery Global, and tell the board at Ethelgard Holdings to prepare for an acquisition. I'm coming into the office tomorrow." She stepped out into the crisp New York night, the mask still in her hand. The small woman Julian had left behind was gone.
The front door clicked shut, the sound echoing through the quiet apartment like a gavel. Julian didn't even take off his tuxedo jacket. He stood in the center of the small living room, smelling of expensive champagne and Chloe Montgomery's floral perfume. He looked at the mismatched furniture and the stacks of Elena's research papers as if he were seeing them for the first time, and hated what he saw. "We need to talk," Julian said. His voice was practiced, devoid of the warmth he had used just that morning. Elena sat at the small dining table, a cup of tea in her hands. She was back in her oversized hoodie, the midnight blue silk gown hidden away. She looked exactly like the woman he thought she was, small, quiet, and predictable. "I saw the news, Julian. The engagement. It's all over social media." Julian flinched, but only for a second. He straightened his posture, regaining his mask of ambition. "Then you know, it's not just about Chloe, Elena. It's about the future. I'm moving into a world of skyscrapers and legacy. I need a partner who can stand on a stage and command it." He walked toward her, pausing a few feet away, as if being too close to her ordinariness might rub off on him. "You're a good woman, you're stable, and you've been a great support, but you're small. You're content in the shadows. I need someone who can own a room, not one who hides in it. We've simply outgrown each other." Elena didn't argue. She didn't scream or throw her tea. She simply watched him with an unreadable expression. "I see. You think I don't fit the life you want?" "I know you don't," Julian replied, his tone growing impatient. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled quickly, tore off a slip of paper and slid it across the table toward her. "This is $5,000. It should cover a few months of rent and help you get settled. Think of it as a parting gift." Elena looked at the check. $5,000. To Julian, this was a generous exit fee. To her, it was less than the hourly consulting fee she charged her top-tier clients. "Is this for my silence, Julian, or for the work I did on your designs?" she asked. Julian laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "It's for the memories. Take it and find a nice, quiet life, Elena. It's what you're built for." He didn't wait for her to respond. He grabbed his remaining bags from the bedroom, already packed, and walked out the door without looking back. The silence that followed was heavy, but not for long. Elena stood up, her movements precise. She picked up the check, looking at Julian's messy signature. Slowly, she tore it into tiny white pieces, letting them flutter onto the table like snow. She walked to her desk and opened her laptop. The screen glowed with a complex dashboard of real estate holdings, stock market fluctuations, and a blinking red notification: Montgomery Global Acquisition, pending. She typed a single command. An hour later, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb outside the humble apartment building. A man in a sharp suit, Leo, the CFO of Montgomery Global, stepped out and waited. Elena emerged from the building. She had changed. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer and high-waisted trousers. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek, tight bun. She didn't look like a freelancer anymore. She looked like a predator. "The board is waiting, Miss Rossi," Leo said, opening the door for her. "The Montgomerys are already celebrating the merger. They have no idea we've started buying up their debt." Elena settled into the leather seat, the scent of expensive leather replacing the smell of Julian's perfume. "Let them celebrate," Elena said, her voice cold and focused. "The higher they climb, the more they have to lose. Drive to the penthouse. I'm done living small." As the SUV pulled away, Elena looked out at the New York City skyline, her eyes fixed on the Montgomery Tower, the crown jewel Julian so desperately wanted to inhabit. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the glass, "the landlord comes home." To be continued. The elevator opened directly into a foyer of white marble and floor-to-ceiling glass. Elena stepped out, the silence of the penthouse a sharp contrast to the sirens and grit of the Brooklyn streets she had just left behind. This was her real world. For 3 years, she had lived in a cramped one-bedroom to keep Julian's ego intact, but this 5,000-square-foot space was where she actually belonged. Leo followed her in, carrying a slim leather briefcase. "The staff has already moved your things from the secondary storage, Miss Rossi. Your wardrobe is ready, and the secure line to the Montgomery audit team is active." Elena walked to the window. From 60 stories up, the city looked like a circuit board, and she was the one controlling the current. "How bad is the Montgomery situation, Leo?" "Worse than they're admitting publicly," Leo said, joining her at the glass. "They've over-leveraged their assets on the Hudson project. If a Thelgard Holdings doesn't step in with a capital injection, they'll be in default within the month. Chloe's father's desperate, though he's still putting on a show for the press." Elena's reflection in the glass was sharp. Gone was the soft, hesitant woman Julian had kissed goodbye. And Julian? "He's been assigned as the lead architect for the Hudson project," Leo replied. "It was his reward for the engagement. He thinks he's designing his legacy." Elena felt a cold spark of satisfaction. "Send the first memo from the Ethelgard office. Tell the Montgomery board that we've reviewed the preliminary designs for the Hudson site. Tell them the structural work is amateur and lackluster. Demand a full revision within 48 hours or we pull the funding." Leo smiled thinly. "Those are Julian's designs. He hasn't slept in 3 days." "Then he should be used to the pressure," Elena said. "He told me I didn't know how to command a room. Let's see how he handles a room that refuses to listen to him." The next morning, Elena sat in a high-backed leather chair in her home office. On her screen, she watched the internal security feed from the Montgomery Global boardroom. Julian was there, looking exhausted. His tie was loose, and his hair was disheveled. Chloe sat beside him, tapping her designer heels impatiently.
I don't understand. Julian's voice came through the speakers, cracked with frustration. These designs were flawless yesterday. Who is this E.V. Rossi? Why won't they meet with us in person? They're reclusive, Julian, Chloe's father snapped. But they own 30% of the skyline. If Rossi says your columns are pedestrian, then they're pedestrian. Fix it, or I'll find someone who can. Elena watched Julian's face pale. He looked small. For the first time, he was the one being told he wasn't good enough. Elena picked up her phone and dialed Leo. He's struggling. Good. Now invite Chloe and her father to a private charity gala this weekend. Tell them the CEO of Ethelgard might make an appearance. Let them think they have a chance to beg for their lives. And Julian? Leo asked. Elena leaned back. A calm, predatory smile touched her lips. Make sure he's there to see me. It's time for his first real lesson in architecture. She hung up and looked at the $5,000 check she had taped back together earlier that morning. It sat on her desk like a trophy. Julian thought he had bought her exit. He had no idea he had actually bought a front-row seat to his own ruin. As the sun set over Manhattan, Elena didn't feel the weight of heartbreak. She felt the weight of a crown. She picked up a pen and signed the first of many documents that would systematically dismantle the Montgomery Empire. But she wasn't just going to take their money, she was going to take their pride. The door to her office opened and a stylist entered, carrying a garment bag. The dress for the gala, Miss Rossi? No, Elena said, her voice steady. The suit. I want them to see exactly who's in charge before I say a word.
The Pierre Hotel ballroom was a palace of gilded ceilings and cold white lilies. It was the kind of room that demanded you belong there, and tonight Julian Thorne looked like a man who was desperately trying to convince himself he did. From the shadows of the mezzanine balcony, Elena watched him. Julian was clutching a champagne flute too tightly, his eyes darting toward the VIP entrance every time the doors opened. Beside him, Chloe Montgomery was a blur of sequins and high-pitched laughter, waving to photographers as if her family's empire weren't currently balanced on a knife's edge. They look nervous, Leo said, appearing at Elena's side. He handed her a glass of sparkling water. The rumor has spread that E.V. Rossi is in the building. Chloe's father has been asking every person in a suit if they're your representative. Let them hunt for a ghost, Elena said. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. She was dressed in a navy power suit, the fabric catching the light with a subtle, expensive shimmer. Her hair was styled in a sleek, architectural wave that framed her face like a shield. Is the audit finished? Leo nodded. The fraud is deeper than we thought. Chloe's father has been moving funds from their charity foundation to cover the interest on their construction loans. It's not just a bankruptcy anymore, Elena. It's a crime. Elena's gaze returned to Julian. He was currently showing a digital tablet to a group of investors, likely explaining the brilliant new revisions to the Hudson Project, revisions Elena had forced Julian to make by rejecting his original work 10 times over. He looked exhausted, the skin under his eyes gray and sallow. He looks small, Elena whispered, more to herself than to Leo. Do you want to meet them now? Leo asked. No, I want them to feel the weight of the silence a little longer. Elena turned and walked down the grand staircase, moving with a grace she had hidden for years. She didn't head for the VIP section. Instead, she circled the perimeter of the room, passing within 10 feet of the table where Julian and Chloe sat. As she passed, the scent of her perfume, a crisp cedar and citrus blend, drifted toward them. Julian froze. He stopped mid-sentence, his head snapping around. He scanned the crowd, his brow furrowed in confusion. For a second, his eyes locked onto the back of Elena's head as she disappeared behind a marble pillar. Julian, are you even listening? Chloe snapped, tugging at his sleeve.
I was saying that once the Ethelgard deal closes, we should buy that yacht in Monaco. I thought I saw someone, Julian muttered, his voice shaking. It's probably nothing. It's the stress, Chloe said, dismissively. You've been obsessed with those design revisions. Forget about it. Look, there's Leo. He's the key to Rossi. Julian watched as Leo approached their table. He stood up straight, wiping his damp palms on his trousers. Leo, any word? Is the CEO here? Leo looked at Julian with a mask of professional indifference. The CEO has finished your review of your latest proposal, Mr. Thorne. Julian leaned in, his face hopeful. And they found it adequate, Leo lied smoothly. However, there are still concerns regarding the financial transparency of Montgomery Global. The CEO has called for a final mandatory meeting at the Ethelgard headquarters tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Bring your original contracts and your legal team. If the papers aren't signed then, the offer is withdrawn permanently. Chloe gasped, a wide smile breaking across her face. We did it. Julian, I told you. They're going to save us. Julian let out a long, shaky breath, a look of immense relief washing over him. Tomorrow morning. I'll be there. Tell Mr. Rossi. Tell him I won't let him down. Leo didn't correct the pronoun. He simply nodded and walked away. Elena, standing behind a curtain in the foyer, watched them celebrate. She saw Julian pull Chloe into a hug, his face filled with the arrogance of a man who thought he had just won the lottery. He had no idea he was celebrating his own funeral. She pulled her phone from her pocket and sent a short text to her legal team. Prepare the liquidation papers and the termination notices. The game ends tomorrow. Elena stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She felt no pity for the man she used to love. She only felt the quiet, steady hum of justice.
The sun rose over Manhattan, turning the glass of the Ethelgard Tower into a pillar of liquid gold. Inside the top-floor boardroom, the air was chilled to a precise 68 degrees. The table was a single 20-foot slab of polished obsidian, reflecting the nervous faces of the people sitting around it. Julian Thorne adjusted his tie for the 10th time. He looked around the room, taking in the minimalist art and the panoramic view of the city. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. One signature, and he would be the man who saved Montgomery Global. He would no longer be the kid from a middle-class suburb. He would be royalty. Chloe sat next to him, her fingers busy scrolling through a luxury real estate app. Her father, Arthur Montgomery, sat at the head of their side of the table, his hands trembling slightly as he checked his watch. "It's 9:05, Arthur," muttered. "Where are they?" "Power move, Dad," Chloe said, not looking up. "Rossi wants us to sweat. It's part of the game." Julian nodded, though his stomach was doing somersaults. "The designs are ready. If they want more changes, I'll stay up all week, whatever it takes to close this." Suddenly, the heavy oak double doors at the far end of the room swung open. 2 security guards stepped aside, followed by Leo and a phalanx of 3 lawyers in charcoal suits. Julian stood up instinctively, his face breaking into a winning, practiced smile. "Good morning, Leo. We're ready to—" Julian's voice died in his throat. Walking behind the lawyers was a woman. She wasn't wearing a mask or a hoodie. She wore a bespoke, ivory power suit that radiated authority. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with a steady, rhythmic confidence that echoed like a heartbeat. Julian's heart stopped. "Elena?" Chloe looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Wait, is that your ex, the researcher?" She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "What are you doing here, Elena? Did you follow Julian? Security!" Elena didn't look at Chloe. She didn't even look at Julian at first. She walked to the head of the table, the seat directly opposite Arthur Montgomery, and pulled out the chair. Leo stepped forward and tucked it in for her. Elena, stop this, Julian said, his voice a frantic whisper. This is a private meeting with the CEO of Ethelgard. You can't be here. If you're here to cater or drop off files, do it quickly and leave before you ruin this for me. Elena finally looked at him. Her eyes were as calm and clear as a winter morning. I'm not here to cater, Julian, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. And I'm not here to drop off files. She sat down, leaning back in the leather chair. She looked at the stack of Julian's revised designs sitting on the table and flicked them aside as if they were trash. I'm the landlord. And as of 5 minutes ago, when the final debt purchase was recorded, I am also your employer. The room went deathly silent. Arthur Montgomery's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. Julian felt the floor drop out from under him. You? Julian stammered, his hands gripping the edge of the table. You're Evie Rossi? EV stands for Elena Vance, she said simply. Rossi was my mother's maiden name. I've owned 30% of this skyline before we met, Julian. I just preferred to stay in the shadows. You told me I didn't know how to own a room. It turns out I just didn't want to own yours. This is a joke, Chloe hissed, her face contorting with rage. Dad, tell her, we're here to sign the bailout. There is no bailout, Elena said. She looked at Leo, who opened a thick folder and slid several documents across the table. This is a full audit of Montgomery Global. It outlines the $400 million missing from your charity foundation, Arthur. It also details the safety violations Julian ignored to keep the Hudson project under budget. Arthur looked at the papers and slumped into his chair, his spirit breaking in real time. I'm not saving your company, Elena continued. I'm liquidating it. I've already contacted the authorities regarding the fraud. As for you, Julian, Elena reached into her blazer pocket. She pulled out a small, clear plastic box. Inside was the $5,000 check Julian had given her, meticulously taped back together. She slid it across the obsidian table. It stopped right in front of him. You told me I was small, she said, her voice devoid of bitterness, replaced only by a cold, professional finality. But the only thing small in this room is your talent and your integrity. Your contract is terminated, your designs are being scrapped, and that check? Keep it. You're going to need it for your legal defense. Julian stared at the check, the tape shimmering under the boardroom lights. He looked at the woman he had treated like an assistant, a woman he had thrown away because she wasn't ambitious enough. He realized that the life he had been chasing, the power, the wealth, the prestige, had been sitting across from him every morning at breakfast, and he had walked away from it for a sinking ship. Elena, please, Julian whispered, his voice breaking. I made a mistake. I loved you. Elena stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. You didn't love me, Julian. You loved the idea of what I could do for you. But I'm done building things for people who don't appreciate the foundation. She turned to Leo. Escort them out. All of them. 10 minutes later, Julian stood on the sidewalk outside the tower. He was alone. Chloe and her father had been whisked away by their lawyers, arguing loudly. He had no job, no fiancé, and a reputation that was currently shattering across the news wires. He looked up at the top floor, but the glass only reflected the sky. High above, Elena Vance stood by her window. She wasn't watching him leave. She was looking past the Montgomery Tower, toward the harbor. Her phone chimed. It was a message from her lead developer. The site for the new community center is cleared, ready for your input, Miss Rossi. Elena smiled, a real, genuine smile. She picked up her pen and began to sketch. She was no longer the architect of Julian's world. She was the architect of her own.